Hello YouTube, Dave here again. I'm back with another viewer question related video. This one was asked to me a little while ago. I can't remember exactly where, if it was a comment or if it was a message on Facebook or even on like Instagram or Twitter. I can't remember exactly where it was now. But recently I've been doing some unboxing videos for some starter sets that I've added to my collection. I recently looked at the Star Wars Age of Rebellion by doing an unboxing of that, and the Symbaroum starter set, Treasure Hunts and Davokar, that was sent to me by Free League. And I've done all kinds of other, starter set unboxings and review videos in the past for different RPGs, and I just love starter sets. I don't know what it is. I guess it's just, I'm a sucker for box sets. I do know that. And I think there's just something about a good introductory product that, I really enjoy just having and reading through. And sometimes it opens up the door to some new RPGs that I never really got into before, never really thought about too much before. And so the question was, were there any starter sets that I bought that actually turned me on to new systems? If there are ones that, they were the reason, the starter set was the reason that I collected for the RPG system to any degree. And I thought that was a really interesting question because most of the starter sets that I own, I actually picked up after having the core rules, which is sort of sounds like a backwards way of doing things, but sometimes, with RPG companies, they try to establish themselves before, putting out the starter set. Like with Starfinder and Pathfinder Second Edition, they had some time for the RPG to sort of, for people to become aware of it and to get sort of word of mouth out there, and then they release the starter sets. The same thing goes for like the Essentials kit for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So there's all kinds of different starter sets, and a lot of them, like I said, I picked up after having the actual core rules. So I couldn't say that they led me to the system, but looking through the sets that I have, there are 5 starter sets that I have that have actually led me to collecting the core rules. So I'm not going to show like all the rule books that I bought based off the starter set, but I'll at least show, the fact that like I picked up, at least one of the core rule books or something afterwards, and talk about some of the other products that I picked up. I'm also going to try to do these in relative chronological order, maybe not necessarily when I got the starter set itself, but when going through that starter set triggered something in me that made me want to investigate the full rule set as a whole. So the first one that I have to talk about is the Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition D&D Essentials starter set. So this is just called, the Dungeons and Dragons Fantasy Role Playing Game starter set. This came out in 2010. So this was sort of part of the soft relaunch of the D&D 4th edition rules. Prior to this set coming out, I really didn't have any interest in 4th edition beyond the player's handbook that I got from my mother as a Christmas gift. Like, I didn't really intend to collect any of the other books. I had toyed with the idea of getting the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual just to sort of have, that series of core rules for the different editions, because I had the core rule books for, first, second, and third at that point in time. But regardless, I didn't pull the trigger until after I picked up this starter set. And I've already done like unboxing videos for everything, so I'm not going to show what's inside the box or anything like that. But I just want to talk a little bit about, the fact that this was something that just caught my eye when it was on store shelves, because I was fully aware of the old Menser D&D basic box set, although I wasn't quite clear on who authored which or how many versions of the basic rules there were, because there were several. But I had known about the red box, and I always heard about the red box and people talking about the red box and how, for a lot of people it was their gateway to Dungeons and Dragons. So when I saw this red box sitting at my local bookstore, I had to pick it up. And I was actually really surprised by it. So, this was for the 4th edition version of the Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game. This was released just ahead of the D&D Essentials line, so this was sort of your gateway to that, which simplified the structure of the classes for like the fighter, rogue, cleric, and all that stuff. And I was really impressed with the adventure that was inside. I've actually run the adventure a couple of times, although Only once did I try running it for 4th edition. The rest of the times I actually ran it for using 5th edition, and it was perfectly fine, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I was really impressed by the layout. I really liked the rules as they were described and explained. And I was really intrigued with the concept of the D&D Essentials line, which is basically a more affordable way to get into the D&D 4th edition. And again, it was meant to rebalance and retool some things. So this box set has seen quite a bit of wear. It's been used a lot, taken on and off my shelf on a number of occasions. So this has definitely had some use over the last decade, which hard to believe it's been a decade, or over a decade actually since this came out. But regardless, this set got me interested in picking up the Heroes of the Fallen Lands, which was the first player's book to come out for the D&D Essentials line. And from that moment, I was hooked. But truthfully, honestly, I wouldn't have really considered it, honestly, if I hadn't picked up this starter set. And 4th edition D&D, I know a lot of people love to hate on it, especially people that have never actually tried it, but just, will say that it's terrible, even though, again, they've never tried it, and then they'll turn around and praise rules elements from 5th edition that were actually first released in 4th edition, but that's a whole other discussion. Like I said, I really hate edition wars. You enjoy what you enjoy. If you love a system, you love a system. You don't have to just necessarily hate something because it's not what you thought it was going to be. But again, whole other topic. I don't want to I don't want to digress too much here. But yeah, so this starter set really got me into not only the Essentials kit or the Essentials rule set, but it also got me collecting D&D 4th edition. So I acquired the player's handbooks, the 3 player's handbooks, the 3 monster manuals, the 2 DMGs, and a whole host of other 4th edition rule books, adventures, and of course the complete D&D Essentials line. And to this day, 4th edition is still one of my favorite versions of the Dungeons & Dragons game. So that never would have happened had I not picked up this shiny, well, not so shiny anymore, but shiny, beautiful looking red box. And yes, I am aware of the fact that they, used the old school logo and artwork probably as a way of catching people with nostalgia, as a way to maybe manipulate them into giving 4th edition a try. Not sure if that was the most ethical way to do it, but you know what? At least now I can say that I do have, a red box version of D&D. And this, like I said, was absolutely awesome. So without this, I never would have gotten into 4th edition D&D, which is one of my favorites. All right, up next, we are jumping ahead a number of years. So that was in 2010. Other starter sets, I mean, the 5th edition one, you could almost say 5th edition D&D starter set maybe did something, but I already had pre-ordered the player's handbook alongside of the starter set, so it's not like one led directly into the other. So it's actually quite a few years from that red box until I got another starter set that I purchased before a core rulebook of the same system. So this is only, I think, a couple of years old at this point. But the next item here is the Call of Cthulhu starter set. Now, I've been a fan of H.P. Lovecraft for a very, very long time. Shortly after I started getting into RPGs, I would hear, guys at the local game store talking about, the Call of Cthulhu and, like the role-playing game specifically, but talking about like the different stories and Lovecraft's writings. And I picked up, a compilation of his works, and then many, many more. And I don't think I've actually read them all yet. I kind of fell behind in that. But I'm pretty sure I have everything he's ever written at this point, just with the sheer number of collected works that I have. But the RPG was something that I was always intrigued by. I was always interested in. I do have the D20 Call of Cthulhu rulebook, as well as a couple of supplements and the Nocturnum campaign. So when like the 6th edition of Call of Cthulhu came out at local bookstores with like the soft cover, I wasn't really that interested, because at that point I didn't want to try learning too many different RPG systems, and part of me kind of wishes I had stuck to that, because man, they really melt together in my skull all these years later. But when 7th edition, I heard some good things about, and then I saw that the starter set was available. I think I watched a live play. It was actually like the guys from Acquisitions Incorporated, I think. Yeah, it was actually the guys from Acquisitions Incorporated playing through a Call of Cthulhu game that convinced me to go out and get the starter set for the 7th edition Call of Cthulhu. And like I said, I hadn't owned anything else for it at this point in time. So I picked this up and I instantly fell in love with the rule set. It was so different that at least at the time, it was difficult to confuse things. And actually, the sanity rules in the D20 Call of Cthulhu rules from like 2001 or 2002 were taken from the Chaosium system because it was a collaborative thing. So it was actually more confusing to look back at the D20 system because it had, the basic D&D D20 mechanics, but then you also had the percentile for sanity. And anyway, but this was a great starter set. I love the character creation system that it presents. The standalone solo adventure was a ton of fun to go through. And it just, really captured my attention. There was just a lot of great quality handouts and, all kinds of things in the set that really impressed me. So, shortly after I ended up picking this up, I went to my local game store and asked them to order me in a copy of the Call of Cthulhu, the core rulebook, or the Keeper rulebook in this case. In addition to that, I did pick up the Keeper, the screen set that came with the screen and some adventures and handouts and character sheets. I also picked up the Investigator's Handbook as well as the Pulp Cthulhu system, which uses basically these core rules but sort of modifies it a little bit to make it more action oriented. Really, still really cool book, but yeah, it's one of my favorite systems overall, and something that I'm kind of still a little bit disheartened by is the fact that I was trying to run a Call of Cthulhu game as one of the monthly games that I'm running online, and I was really enjoying it, really getting into it, but then things kind of started getting a little rough at home, and I just never got around to designing or properly writing out the next part of the scenario that I was building towards. And now I feel like it's kind of too late. I might try to restart that campaign at some point, because yeah, it's a fantastic system. I absolutely love it. And I never really, like I said, I probably wouldn't have gotten into it had I not picked up the starter set. So this starter set is 100% absolutely the reason why I ended up picking up the Keeper rulebook, the Game Master screen, the Investigator's Handbook, and of course the Pulp Cthulhu book as well. So owe a lot to this awesome starter set. All right, up next we have a starter set that I purchased chronologically before the Call of Cthulhu one, but it didn't lead to me getting into the rule set until afterwards. So this is the Star Trek Adventures starter set. I think I did an unboxing video, but I don't think I've ever done a proper review. I've actually sat down to record some reviews for Star Trek Adventures a couple of times, and they just never turned out the way that I wanted to, or I'd have issues with the camera, or like the battery, or just like I'd lose my voice, which really sucks when you get like, 3/4 of the way through a video and then suddenly every time you go to talk, you just start like your throat gets dry and it makes you start coughing and hacking. Anyway, again, I'm getting off topic here. But I actually picked this up from my local game store. I believe it was during one of the HalCon weekends. So HalCon was it's the big, comic gaming cosplay convention here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And my nearest local game store, they have I think it was like a 20% off sale. I don't know if the percentages stay the same, but I think it was like 20% off everything in the store during that weekend. So to get people into the store as well. So that way, if you couldn't get into the convention, you could still go down to the store and hopefully pick up some cool stuff. But this was a starter set that I was quasi on the fence about. I really liked the layout of it. I liked the rules themselves seem, pretty simple. Like I love the idea of having to roll like a d20 and lower numbers are better because I tend to roll garbage numbers. Um, so I kind of like that aspect of it, and having difficulty, meaning you need multiple successes sometimes to achieve a task, and you may have to, the number of successes you need might be more than the dice that you normally have available to you, so you have to buy extra ones by giving the game master what's called threat, which he can spend to add like NPC reinforcements to a combat scenario or impose like a complication or stuff like that. So it was just overall, it was a really cool system, but I just never really fully wrapped my head around it until sometime later. It was actually during the pandemic when I finally had the time to sit down and really start reading through it. And the adventure in here was fantastic because it actually references some of the more obscure elements from like the next generation, basically. So it involves like the warp 5 restriction, which the show maybe mentioned once or twice after the episode where it was established, and and then just sort of never really bothered with again. It had also had the parasites, like the mind controlling parasites from season 1. I think it was season 1. Yeah, because Riker didn't have the beard yet. Which, they sort of try to take over Starfleet. So they actually have those and the Warp 5 thing. And I want to say it also has the gateway that you can travel through. I forget the name of the civilization. We actually just watched the episode, my wife and I, not too long ago. But I just forget the name of the episode at this point, or the race. But it was just something that, like, the more I started looking at this, I then turned that around and started watching Star Trek again, and I just sort of like fell back in love with the whole, the setting in the universe. So like I said, during the pandemic, I picked up the Star Trek Adventures core rulebook, as well as, I don't have the Game Master's kit yet, but that is something I do hope to get. But I did pick up the Alpha Quadrant source book, the Beta Quadrant source book, and the Delta Quadrant source book. The store that I was purchasing these from still doesn't have actually the Gamma Quadrant book available, so I'm hoping that that's not something that's going to be impossible to find, because it will drive me insane having all 3 of the other ones and not that one. There's also supposed to be like a campaign book coming out later in 2021, which I'm really interested in. And they also have a Klingon Empire core rulebook, so it's like the size of this, which is a pretty hefty book, so that you can actually play as Klingons, and everything's from the Klingon perspective. So it's just a really, really cool system. And again, I probably never would have even thought about it had I not picked up the starter set, really just on a whim, because it was, on sale for relatively cheap. And, I wanted to get something new, and I just figured, what the heck, and ended up picking up, and I'm so glad that I did, because I do love the system and hope to run it one of these days, sometime very soon. All right, so that was 3. So the fourth starter set that I can say really rekindled an interest or drove me to start collecting for the edition or the rule set that this was a part of is actually the Pathfinder First Edition Beginner Box. So this was another pandemic purchase. It was, I had the Starfinder Beginner Box, and I want to say that the second edition one was either, I don't think it was out yet, but I think it was coming out, and I was aware of it, so I was excited for it. I can't remember the exact timing. But this was something that I really wanted to get, and I was afraid that I just wouldn't be able to, because, it's for an out-of-print edition now, and the bookstore that I was ordering stuff from at the start of the pandemic, they had it listed as out of stock, so I thought that was it, right? Because they had like warning, 1 in stock, hurry now, and I didn't. So anyway, they did end up restocking. They had I think a dozen that they got in, according to the website's inventory. But yeah, so this Pathfinder First Edition. So Pathfinder First Edition is it was released in the actual rule set was released in 2009. There were Pathfinder products with the Pathfinder name that came out prior to that, and they were using the Open Gaming license to publish materials for D&D 3.5 because they were, Paizo was running Dungeon Magazine and Dragon Magazine, but more importantly Dungeon Magazine for Wizards of the Coast for years, and then suddenly, like, they were doing their adventure paths. They had, they had actually built up a really solid, subscriber base for Dungeon in particular, which was a failing magazine before. And when Wizards said, yeah, we're canceling the physical print run and we're going to do it online and we're going to do it ourselves, it kind of put Paizo in a bit of a bind. I'm sure that it wasn't like a sudden thing where it was, dropped on them without any warning, because they did extend the print run of the magazine beyond what they originally intended to, so that they could actually finish the Savage Tide adventure path. But Paizo, having, these fans, having these people that wanted to support them, they decided to make their own RPG using the open gaming license for their own RPG products. And then they released a Pathfinder first edition rule set, which was sort of, some people call it D&D 3.75 because it is very close to what D&D 3.5 was, but it was a much better version of the 3.5 rules. Now, I had pretty much sworn off 3.5 D&D. I had run 3rd edition and 3.5 combined from 2000 until 2012, and the system stopped publication in 2008 for 3.5 D&D. So it had been 4 years after it went out of print, or they stopped doing it and then moved on to the next edition, that I was still running it. So I was just kind of burnt out on it. I was done with it, and I have the hardcover core rulebook, but I bought that because a friend wanted to run a campaign that we did a couple sessions of, and then unfortunately it fell apart. But I had no interest in Pathfinder beyond that. In fact, I even believe, if I recall correctly, I even did a video explaining that I just wasn't interested in Pathfinder First Edition. So fast forward a few years after that, and having a lockdown and trying to find things to occupy myself with throughout the day, all day, without being able to go anywhere. This was available, so I picked it up. And I started looking through it, and I picked up a few other Pathfinder First Edition books for, purposes of doing videos. But once I got this, it was sort of like a no going back sort of thing. So I ended up, building a collection of Pathfinder First Edition books, which were all based on the pocket editions. So I have all 6 of the bestiaries. I have the Villain Codex and the Monster Codex, which were actually sent to me by a viewer, which was awesome, along with the Wilderness Adventures, and I think it was the Occult Adventures. It was just really, really awesome and really helped out quite a bit. But I also picked up the Rise of the Rune Lords compilation book, or the pocket edition, which was based off of the hardcover. That was the very first adventure path they put out, which was actually originally for D&D 3.5 before they converted it to the Pathfinder rules. And I had that, but I actually had bought that because I was going to convert it to Pathfinder 2nd edition. But now I actually kind of want to run it as Pathfinder 1st edition. And, after getting that, I picked up a bunch of the pocket editions, including a pocket edition of the core rulebook. That way, my entire Pathfinder 1E collection can be the pocket editions. I still don't know what I'm going to do with the hardcover book yet. It's the only Pathfinder hardcover book that I have. So I am considering maybe if I have friends that are interested in it, I might give it to them or take it into my local game store. Or I might just hold on to it. I still don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. But I will say that my desire, my interest, my willingness to look at Pathfinder First Edition comes 100% from picking up the beginner box starter set. So, like I said, these things can absolutely work. And then finally, the most recent one that has led me to picking up the full rule set after getting into it. It's a little hefty here. So this is the Alien role-playing game starter set. So I've done an unboxing video and review, and I just absolutely love this. This was actually sent to me, the starter set was sent to me by Free League for doing review purposes. I was really just blown away by it. The Alien role-playing game, I want to do a full review of like my thoughts on the system. The basic thing that I will say here is it's a really easy system to learn. It just uses D6s. You have a dice pool system. I've done, explanations of how to like roll your skill checks and create characters and stuff like that, how to do combat. But the actual setting, the best way I can describe it is a love letter to fans of the Alien franchise. It actually uses the official Alien canon that's sort of developed or compiled after, I think it was after Disney actually bought 20th Century Fox, the movie division, that they wanted to have a solid, definitive canon, like timeline that they can use. So there's a lot of things that are in this, like I said, and it's based off of the canon documents. So it includes events up to Alien 3 and a little bit beyond. Doesn't quite get to Resurrection yet, which is fine. Definitely fine. But it has things like O'Bannon's World, which Dan O'Bannon was the original screenwriter for the Alien movie back in the late 1970s. It has the Vincent Ward's Wooden Planet. So if you know anything about the Alien 3 debacle in terms of like the production, and don't get me wrong, I love Alien 3. It's, for whatever reason, weird reason, it is my favorite of the Alien franchise, but that's, again, a whole other discussion. But originally, one of the directors hired was Vincent Ward, and he wanted to basically do more or less what they kind of went with, where, Ripley crash lands on this planet, and it's run by these like religious zealots. She's the only survivor, and there's an alien on board, and it starts killing, people. And one of the monks, or one of the religious fanatics, feels that the xenomorph is this godlike creature, and starts to worship it. Anyway, so there's a lot of similarities, but instead of it being a prison colony on an actual planet, regular planet, it was actually set on this space station, which is basically like the space station. Everything on the space station was clad in wood, so it covered up all the metal. It was this weird juxtaposition where everything was meant to look medieval, and the religious fanatics on this space station on this planet were ones that believed that technology was sort of, evil, or they just wanted to live simplistic lives while also being on one of the most technologically advanced platforms you could possibly be on. But anyway, it actually has the wooden planet. And I just think that's really cool, because it is a nod to the early production of Alien 3. So I love stuff like that. It actually also does the black goo pathogen, yeah, the neomorphs and stuff like that from the newer movies. It does that so much better. Like, it's almost crazy how much better they present those concepts in the RPG versus the movies. In fact, the adventure in here, Chariot of the Gods, is this weird hybrid of 1979's Alien with Alien Covenant, because you have the crew awakening in the middle of a mission, answering a distress beacon. They go on to another ship, and the ship actually has been taken over by, at some point, the black goo pathogen had been released, and it was now in these the spore forms, where if you stepped on them, it would sort of puff out these spores that could infect you. Anyway, it does a really good job of actually marrying the two together and having it actually just really work and make sense and just be well done. Anyway, I'm sort of going off again on, yeah, because of how much I like the starter set, I went out and purchased the core rulebook. Now, for some odd reason, these aren't scratches. I thought they were scratches, but for some reason, the coating on the top seems to have weirdly bubbled on this cover. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if it was just an issue where it was exposed to the sun or the humidity. It's a very humid province here in Nova Scotia, but I'm not worried about that. But I did get this core rulebook based solely on how much I loved the starter set. Now, the starter set can actually be the only thing that you need to run the box set scenarios that come out. Because it's what's called the cinematic style of play, where they have sort of self-contained adventures that mimic the feel or capture the feel of the movies. So, you know, your characters probably aren't all going to make it. So you want to be able to have your death scene ready to go when the time comes. But you can just use the starter set. So you don't technically need the core rulebook if that's all you're looking to do. And I do have the Destroyer of Worlds box set, which again, I could run just with this. But I will say, I absolutely 100% am glad that I picked this up. I love the book. I love the set, like the detailed setting information. You know, the expanded creatures that are in here, even the campaign style play. So the more traditional RPG where you're running stuff for, you know, several months, perhaps even, versus just, you know, a couple of sessions. So overall, yeah, this starter set really got me into the Alien role-playing game, which again is something that I want to run hopefully at some point in the very near future. In addition to the core rulebook, I also picked up the Game Master screen, which I pretty sure I did a video on that as well. But again, had I not gotten the starter set, then I probably never would have picked up the core rulebook. So that's an example of like the starter set really, you know, triggering something in me. So with that, those are the 5 starter sets in my collection that I can honestly say are the reason why I got into the RPGs that they represent. So, like, you know, there's all kinds of other starter sets that I have. As I've said, I had the core rules either before or I got them at the same time, so one didn't lead to the other in that situation. So let me know in the comments below, what are some of the starter sets that you've picked up? Maybe on a whim, maybe out of just curiosity, maybe because you've heard good things about it and you just wanted to give the system a try using like their introductory product. But let me know in the comments below, what are some of the starter sets that you've picked out that have actually led you to purchasing the full rule set afterwards that you like so much that you started collecting even a little bit for the RPG in question. So I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. There's a couple of honorable mentions that I'm not going to show the sets for them here just because they're out of reach and I didn't think about it until just now. But the Simbaroom starter set that was sent to me is one that I'm also very interested in potentially getting the core rulebook for. Something that I just have to spend a little bit more time with it, as well as the Star Wars Age of Rebellion beginner game that I have that very well could lead to me getting the starter set rules as well, or the core rules as well. So if that happens, I will keep you guys updated. But yeah, let me know what are some of your favorite starter sets that opened a door to a new RPG for you. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.